Krishna, everybody. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. You know, Srila Prabhupada, he had a plot. Plot means a plan, you know. His plan was to uplift spiritually human society by the mass distribution of his books. And the fact is that as time goes by, more and more people because of the social and economic, political, etc., difficulties, it's getting harder and harder for them to sit down and concentrate on just turning pages and reading a book. Thank you very much. These online live stream readings of Srila Prabhupada's books and the audio books that we're recording every morning are going to be, I think, a great contribution to future generations of Vaishnavas. So I'm inspired by the response that I'm getting from all of you out there in cyberspace and also from the devotees that are coming every day to hear. And you can literally feel, something happening, something growing, and Hare Krishna. So that's just my thanks to you, all of you. Hare Krishna.
Can you position the mic?
How do you know it's too soft? Somebody said it's too soft? Too particular. Hare Krishna, Jai Shri and Rati. Can you hear me now? Did they say okay now? Maybe my voice is too deep and rich. Because it's getting like that as a result of my recording. What do you want me to do? Put it in my nose or something?
Just a little high. Just a little higher. Good, they said yes, they can hear you.
Okay, good. Local saints. Okay. With that, let us embark further on the journey of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And we have a guest who has made a vow and is keeping his word to be here at the reading from the beginning. Giridhar Swami Maharaj ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Hari Bol. Oh. Okay, yes, now it's time for his garland. Hare Krishna. Okay. You give that to Pranata Karuna. He's earning it. Yes. Hare Krishna. It's a milestone. First, honest to goodness, full-time brahmachari ashram in the history of this yatra. Well, since we moved from Rosalie Street, that was a long time ago. Okay. Sanatana Goswami had something to say about the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and we're going to hear what he's had to say right now. Sarva Shastra Dipiyusha Sarva Vayadaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalindwan Dodita Ditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you who were supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madhika Bando Matsangin Madgudo Mad Mahadana Mad Nistadaka Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu saduta dayin atini chochata kada hanamuncha gadachin mam premna rit kantayospuda. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Dhruva Maharaj, at 5 years old, has come to the perfection after only 6 months of strictly following the instructions of his spiritual master, Narada Muni. And he has seen the Lord face to face. And he's offering his prayers after the Lord touched his forehead with his conch shell. 5 years old, what do you know at 5 years old? You can't give a discourse, you can't offer flowing prayers. But with the touch of his conch shell, Dhruva Maharaj became fully self-realized. My Lord, O Supreme Lord, you are the supreme personified form of all benediction. Therefore, one who abides in your devotional service with no other desire, worshipping your lotus feet, is better than becoming king and lording it over a kingdom. That is the benediction of worshipping your lotus feet. To ignorant devotees like me, you are the causeless, merciful maintainer, just like a cow who takes care of the newly born calf by supplying milk and giving it protection from attack. Purport. Dhruva Maharaj was cognizant of the defective nature of his own devotional service. Pure devotional service is without material form and is not covered by mental speculation or fruitive activities. Pure devotional service is therefore called ahetuki, unmotivated. Dhruva Maharaj knew that he had come to worship the Lord in devotional service with a motive to get the kingdom of his father. Such an adulterated devotee can never see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He therefore felt very grateful for the causeless mercy of the Lord. The Lord is so merciful that not only does he fulfill the desires of a devotee who is driven by ignorance and desires for material benefit, but he also gives such a devotee all protection, just as a cow gives milk to a newly born calf. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said that the Lord gives intelligence to the constantly engaged devotee so that he may gradually approach the Lord without difficulty. A devotee must be very sincere in his devotional service. Then, although there may be many things wrong on the devotee's part, Krishna will guide him and gradually elevate him to the highest position of devotional service. The Lord is addressed herein by Dhruva Maharaj as Purushartha Murti, the ultimate goal of life. Generally, Purushartha is taken to mean execution of a type of religious principle or worship of God in order to get material benediction. Prayers for material benediction are intended for satisfying the senses. And when one is frustrated and cannot fully satisfy the senses in spite of all endeavor, he desires liberation or freedom from material existence. These activities are generally called purushartha, but actually the ultimate goal is to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is called Panchama Purushartha, the ultimate goal of life. Lord Chaitanya therefore taught us not to ask from the Supreme Personality any benediction, such as material wealth, popularity, or a good wife. One should simply pray to the Lord to be constantly engaged in his transcendental loving service. Dhruva Maharaj, being cognizant of his desire for material benefit, wanted protection from the Lord so that he might not be misled or deviated from the path of devotional service by material desires. Text 18. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, when Dhruva Maharaj, who had good intentions in his heart, finished his prayer, the Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, who was very kind to his devotees and servants, congratulated him, speaking as follows. Text 19. The Personality of Godhead said, My dear Dhruva, son of the king, you have executed pious vows, and I also know the desire within your heart. Although your desire is very ambitious and very difficult to fulfill, I shall favor you with its fulfillment. All good fortune unto you. Purport. The Lord is so merciful to his devotee that he immediately said to Dhruva Maharaj, Let there be all good fortune for you. The fact is that Dhruva Maharaj was very much afraid in his mind, for he had aspired after material benefit in discharging his devotional service, and this was hampering him from reaching the stage of love of God. In the Bhagavad Gita 2:44, it is said, Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam, those who are addicted to material pleasure cannot be attracted to devotional service. It was true that at heart Dhruva Maharaj wanted a kingdom that would be far better than Brahmaloka. This was a natural desire for a Kshatriya. He was also only 5 years old, and in his childish way, he desired to have a kingdom far greater than his fathers, grandfathers, or great-grandfathers. Uttanapad was the son of Manu, and Manu was the son of Lord Brahma. Dhruva wanted to excel all these great family members. The Lord knew Dhruva Maharaj's childish ambition, but how it was possible to offer Dhruva a position more exalted than Lord Brahma's.
Everyone is complaining that the volume is too low.
Well, what do you want me to do? It's right next to my face. Well, you got to tolerate. You know, sometimes you have to tolerate something. Everything's...
They said I got it.
Well, there you go. Yay!
That was saying, great, now it's good. That fixed it.
No, that was because of this. It was either this or the other one.
Okay.
Mystic technology. It's always imperfect no matter what you do. Right? Let's not get distracted. The Lord knew Dhruva Maharaj's childish ambition, but how was it possible to offer Dhruva a position more exalted than Lord Brahma's? The Lord assured Dhruva Maharaj that Dhruva would not be bereft of the Lord's love. He encouraged Dhruva not to be worried that he childishly had material desires, and at the same time had the pure aspiration to be a great devotee. Generally, the Lord does not award a pure devotee material opulence, even though he may desire it. But Dhruva Maharaj's case was different. The Lord knew that he was such a great devotee that in spite of having material opulence, he would never be deviated from love of God. This example illustrates that a highly qualified devotee can have the facility of material enjoyment and at the same time execute love of God. This, however, was a special case for Dhruva Maharaj. Text 20:21. The Supreme Personality of Godhead continued, "My dear Dhruva, I shall award you the glowing planet known as the pole star, which will continue to exist even after the dissolution at the end of the millennium. No one has ever ruled this planet, which is surrounded by all the solar systems, planets, and stars. All the luminaries in the sky circumambulate this planet, just as bulls tread around a central pole for the purpose of crushing grains. Keeping the pole star to their right, all the stars inhabited by the great sages like Dharma, Agni, Kashyapa, and Shukra circumambulate this planet, which continues to exist even after the dissolution of all others." Purport. Although the pole star existed before its occupation by Dhruva Maharaj, it had no predominating deity. Dhruvaloka, our pole star, is the center for all other stars and solar systems, for all of them circle around Dhruvaloka just as a bull crushes grains by walking around and around a central pole. Dhruva wanted the best of all planets, and although it was a childish prayer, the Lord satisfied his demand. A small child may demand something from his father, which his father has never given to anyone else, yet out of affection, the father offers it to the child. Similarly, this unique planet, Dhruvaloka, was offered to Maharaj Dhruva. The specific significance of this planet is that until the entire universe is annihilated, this planet will remain, even during the devastation which takes place during the night of Lord Brahma. There are two kinds of dissolutions, one during the night of Lord Brahma and one at the end of Lord Brahma's life. At the end of Brahma's life, selected personalities go back home, back to Godhead. Dhruva Maharaj is one of them. The Lord assured Dhruva that he would exist beyond the partial dissolution of this universe. Thus, at the end of the complete dissolution, Dhruva Maharaj would go directly to Vaikuntha Loka, to a spiritual planet in the spiritual sky. Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur comments in this connection that Dhruva Loka is one of the lokas like Shwetadvip, Mathura, and Dwarka. They are all eternal places in the kingdom of Godhead, which is described in the Bhagavad Gita, Tad Dhamma Paramam, and in the Vedas, Om Tad Vishno Paramam Padam Sada Pashanti Suryaha. The words Parastat Kalpa Vasinam, transcendental to the planets inhabited after the dissolution, refer to the Vaikuntha planets. In other words, Dhruva Maharaj's promotion to the Vaikuntha Lokas was guaranteed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 22. After your father goes to the forest and awards you the rule of his kingdom, you will rule continuously the entire world for 36,000 years. And all your senses will continue to be as strong as they are now. You will never become old. Purport. In the Satya Yuga, people generally lived for 100,000 years. Dhruva Maharaj's ruling the world for 36,000 years was quite possible in those days. Text 23. The Lord continued, Sometime in the future, your brother Uttama will go hunting in the forest, and while absorbed in hunting, he will be killed. Your stepmother Suruchi, being maddened upon the death of her son, will go to search him out in the forest, but she will be devoured by a forest fire. Purport. Dhruva Maharaj came to the forest to search out the Supreme Personality of Godhead with the revenging spirit against his stepmother. His stepmother had insulted Dhruva, who was not an ordinary person, but a great Vaishnava. An offense at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava is the greatest offense in this world. Because of having insulted Dhruva Maharaj, Suruchi would become mad upon the death of her son and would enter a forest fire, and thus her life would be ended. This was specifically mentioned by the Lord to Dhruva because he was determined for revenge against her. For this we should take the lesson that we should never try to insult a Vaishnava. Not only should we not insult a Vaishnava, but we should not insult anyone unnecessarily. When Suruchi insulted Dhruva Maharaj, he was just a child. She, of course, did not know that Dhruva was a great recognized Vaishnava, and so her offense was committed unknowingly. When one serves a Vaishnava unknowingly, one still gets the good results, and if one unknowingly insults a Vaishnava, one suffers the bad result. A Vaishnava is especially favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pleasing him or displeasing him directly affects the pleasure and displeasure of the Supreme Lord. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his 8 stanzas of prayer to the spiritual master, has sung, Yasya prasadad bhagavat prasada. By pleasing the spiritual master, who is a pure Vaishnava, one pleases the personality of Godhead. But if one displeases the spiritual master, one does not know where he is going. Text 24. The Lord continued, I am the heart of all sacrifices. You will be able to perform many great sacrifices and also give great charities. In this way you will be able to enjoy the blessings of material happiness in this life, and at the time of your death, you will be able to remember me. Purport. The most important factor in this verse is the Lord's instructions regarding how to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead at the end of life. Ante Narayana Smriti. The result of whatever we do in executing spiritual activities is successful if we can remember Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This program of constant remembrance can be disturbed by many things, but Dhruva Maharaj's life would be so pure, as assured by the Lord himself, that Dhruva would never forget him. Thus, at the time of his death, he would remember the Supreme Lord, and before his death, he would enjoy this material world, not by sense gratification, but by performing great sacrifices. As stated in the Vedas, when one performs great sacrifices, he must give charity, not only to the Brahmanas, but also to the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. It is assured here that Dhruva Maharaj would be able to perform such activities. In this age of Kali, however, the great sacrifice is the performance of Sankirtan Yajna. Our Krishna consciousness movement is designed to teach people and to learn ourselves the exact instruction of the personality of Godhead. In this way we shall continuously perform the Sankirtan Yajna and continuously chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Then at the end of our lives we shall certainly be able to remember Krishna, and our program of life will be successful. Jai Prabhupada ki Jai. In this age, distribution of prasad has replaced distribution of money. No one has sufficient money to distribute, but if we distribute Krishna prasad as far as possible, this is more valuable than the distribution of money. Text 35. The personality of Godhead continued, My dear Dhruva, after your material life in this body, you will go to my planet, which is always offered obeisances by the residents of all other planetary systems. It is situated above the planets of the 7 rishis, and having gone there, you will never have to come back again to this material world. Purport. In this verse, the word navartate is very significant. The Lord says, you will not come back to this material world, for you will reach matstanam, my abode. Therefore, Dhruva or the pole star, is the abode of Lord Vishnu within this material world. Upon it, there is an ocean of milk, and within that ocean, there is an island known as Shweta-dweep. It is clearly indicated that this planet is situated above the 7 planetary systems of the rishis, and because this planet is Vishnu Loka, it is worshipped by all other planetary systems. It may be questioned here, what will happen to the planet known as Dhruva Loka at the time of dissolution of this universe? The answer is simple. Dhruva Loka remains, like other Vaikuntha Lokas, beyond this universe. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has commented in this connection that the very word navartate indicates that this planet is eternal. Text 26. The great sage Maitreya said, after being worshipped and honored by the boy, Dhruva Maharaj, after being worshipped and honored by the boy Dhruva Maharaj, and after offering him his abode, Lord Vishnu, on the back of Garuda, returned to his abode as Dhruva Maharaj looked on. Purport. From this verse it appears that Lord Vishnu awarded Dhruva Maharaj the same abode in which he resides. His abode is described in the Bhagavad Gita 15.6, Yad gatva nanivartante tad dhamma paramam mama. Text 27. Despite having achieved the desired result of his determination by worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord, Dhruva Maharaj was not very pleased. Thus, he returned to his home. Purport. By worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord in devotional service, as instructed by Narada Muni, Dhruva Maharaj achieved the desired result. His desire was to get a very exalted position, excelling that of his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. And although it was somewhat childish determination, because Dhruva Maharaj was nothing but a small child, Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is so kind and merciful that he fulfilled Dhruva's desire. Dhruva Maharaj wanted a residence more exalted than any ever occupied by anyone else in his family. Therefore he was offered the planet in which the Lord personally resides, and his determination was completely satisfied. Still, when Dhruva Maharaj returned home, he was not very much pleased. For although in pure devotional service there is no demand from the Lord, because of his childish nature, he had demanded something. Thus, although the Lord also fulfilled his desire, he was not very pleased. Rather, he was ashamed that he had demanded something from the Lord, for he should not have done this. Text 28. Sri Vidura inquired, My dear Brahmana, the abode of the Lord is very difficult to attain. It can be attained only by pure devotional service, which alone pleases the most affectionate, merciful Lord. Dhruva Maharaj achieved this position even in one life, and he was not very wise and conscientious. Why then was he not very pleased? Purport. Saint Vidura's inquiry is very relevant. The word artabit, which refers to one who knows how to discriminate between reality and unreality, is very significant in this connection. An artavit is also called paramahansa. A paramahansa accepts only the active principle of everything, just as a swan accepts only the milk from a mixture of water and milk. A Paramahamsa accepts only the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his life and soul, neglecting all external material things. Dhruva Maharaj was in this category, and due to his determination, he achieved the result he desired, but still, when he returned home, he was not very pleased. Is there a comma in the book after the word achieved? I didn't think so. Yeah, there is one.
There is. Mm-hmm. In the newer one there is.
Uh-huh.
Determination he achieved.
Uh-huh. Determined he achieved the result he desired. Okay. Text 29. Translation. Maitreya answered, Dhruva Maharaja's heart, which was pierced by the arrows of the harsh words of his stepmother, was greatly aggrieved, and thus when he fixed upon his goal of life, he did not forget her misbehavior. He did not demand actual liberation from this material world, but at the end of his devotional service, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared before him, he was simply ashamed of the material demands he had in his mind. Purport. This important verse has been discussed by many stalwart commentators. Why was Dhruva Maharaj not very pleased, even after achieving the goal of life he desired? A pure devotee is always free from any kind of material desires. In the material world, one's material desires are most demonic. One thinks of others as one's enemies. One thinks of revenge against one's enemies. One aspires to become the topmost leader or topmost person in this material world, and thus one competes with all others. This has been described in the Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter, as asuric. A pure devotee has no demand from the Lord. His only concern is to serve the Lord sincerely and seriously, and he is not at all concerned about what will happen in the future. In the Mukunda Mala Stotra, King Kulishekar, author of the book, states in his prayer, My dear Lord, I don't want any position of sense gratification within this material world. I simply want to engage in your service perpetually. Similarly, Lord Chaitanya in his Shikshastika also prayed, My Lord, I do not want any amount of material wealth. I do not want any number of materialistic followers, nor do I want any attractive wife to enjoy. The only thing I want is that I may engage life after life in your service. Lord Chaitanya did not pray even for mukti or liberation. In this verse, Maitreya replied to Vidura that Dhruva Maharaj, influenced by a revengeful attitude towards his insulting stepmother, did not think of mukti, nor did he know what mukti was. Therefore he failed to aim for mukti as his goal of life. But a pure devotee also does not want liberation. He is a soul completely surrendered to the Supreme Lord, and he does not demand anything from the Lord. This position was realized by Dhruva Maharaj when he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally present before him, because he was elevated to the Vasudeva platform. The Vasudeva platform refers to the stage at which material contamination is conspicuous by absence only, or in other words, where there is no question of the material modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. And one can therefore see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because on the Vasudeva platform, one can see God face to face, their Lord is also called Vasudeva. Dhruva Maharaj's demand was for a position so exalted that it was never enjoyed even by Lord Brahma, his great-grandfather. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is so affectionate and kind towards his devotee, especially to a devotee like Dhruva Maharaj, who went to render devotional service in the forest alone at the age of only 5 years, that although the motive might be impure, the Lord does not consider the motive. He is concerned with the service. But if a devotee has a particular motive, the Lord directly or indirectly knows it, and therefore he does not leave the devotee's material desires unfulfilled. These are some of the special favors by the Lord to a devotee. Dhruva Maharaj was offered Dhruvaloka, a planet that was never resided upon by any conditioned soul. Even Brahma, although the topmost living creature within this universe, was not allowed to enter the Dhruvaloka. Whenever there is a crisis within this universe, the demigods go to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Chirodakashai Vishnu, and they stand on the beach of the Milk Ocean. So the fulfillment of Dhruva Maharaj's demand, a position more exalted than that of even his great-grandfather, Brahma, was offered to him. Here in this verse, the Lord is described as Muktipati, which means one under whose lotus feet there are all kinds of mukti. There are 5 kinds of mukti: Sayuja, Sarupya, Salokya, Samipya, and Sharsti. Out of these 5 muktis, which can be achieved by any person engaged in devotional service to the Lord, the one which is known as Sayuja is generally demanded by Mayavadi philosophers. They demand to become one with the impersonal Brahman, effulgence of the Lord. In the opinion of many scholars, this Sayuja Mukti, although counted among the 5 kinds of Mukti, is not actually Mukti, because from Sayuja Mukti, one may again fall down to this material world. This information we have from the Srimad-Bhagavatam, 10.3.32, wherein it is said, Patantyada, which means they again fall down. The monist philosopher, after executing severe austerity, merges into the impersonal effulgence of the Lord. But the living entity always wants reciprocation in loving affairs. Therefore, although the monist philosopher is elevated to the status of being one with the effulgence of the Lord, because there is no facility for associating with the Lord and rendering service unto Him, he again falls into this material world, and his service propensity is satisfied by materialistic welfare activities like humanitarianism, altruism, and philanthropy. There are many such instances of such fall downs, even for great sannyasis in the Mayavad school. Therefore, Vaishnava philosophers do not accept Sayuja Mukti to be within the category of Mukti. According to them, Mukti means transferal to the loving service of the Lord from one's position of serving Maya. Lord Chaitanya also says in this connection that the constitutional position of a living entity is to render service to the Lord. That is real mukti. When one is situated in his original position, giving up artificial positions, he is called mukta, or liberated. In the Bhagavad Gita, this is confirmed. Anyone who engages in rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord is considered to be mukta, or brahmabhuta. It is said in Bhagavad Gita that a devotee is considered to be on the brahmabhuta platform when he has no material contamination. In the Padma Purana, this is also confirmed. Mukti means engagement in the service of the Lord. The great sage Maitreya explained to Dhruva Maharaj, did not desire in the beginning to engage in the service of the Lord, but he wanted an exalted position better than his great-grandfather's. This is more or less not service to the Lord, but service to the senses. Even if one gets the position of Brahma, the most exalted position in this material world, he is a conditioned soul. Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati says that if one is elevated to real pure devotional service, he considers even great demigods like Brahma and Indra to be on an equal level with an insignificant insect. The reason is that an insignificant insect has a desire for sense gratification, and even a great personality like Lord Brahma also wants to dominate this material nature. Sense gratification means domination over material nature. The whole competition between conditioned souls is based upon domination of this material nature. Modern scientists are proud of their knowledge because they are discovering new methods to dominate the laws of material nature. They think that this is the advancement of human civilization. The more they can dominate the material laws, the more advanced they think they are. Dhruva Maharaja's propensity in the beginning was like that. He wanted to dominate this material world in a greater position than Lord Brahma. Therefore, elsewhere it is described that after the appearance of the Lord, when Dhruva Maharaj thought and compared his determination to his final reward, he realized that he had wanted a few particles of broken glass, but instead had received many diamonds. As soon as he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face, he immediately became conscious of the unimportance of his demand from the Lord to have an exalted position better than Lord Brahma's. When Dhruva Maharaj became situated on the Vasudeva platform, due to seeing the Lord face to face, all his material contamination was cleared. Thus he became ashamed of what his demands were and what he had achieved. He was very much ashamed to think that although he had gone to Madhuvan, giving up the kingdom of his father, and he had gotten a spiritual master like Narada Muni, he was still thinking of revenge against his stepmother and wanted to occupy an exalted post within this material world. These were the causes for his moroseness, even after he received all the desired benedictions from the Lord. When Dhruva Maharaj factually saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there was no question of a revengeful attitude towards his stepmother, nor any aspiration to lord it over the material world. But the Supreme Personality is so kind that he knew that Dhruva Maharaj wanted these. Speaking before Dhruva Maharaj, he used the word Vedaham, because when Dhruva Maharaj demanded material benefits, the Lord was present within his heart and so knew everything. The Lord always knows everything a man is thinking. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita also. Vedaham samatitani. The Lord fulfilled all Dhruva Maharaj's desires. His revengeful attitude towards his stepmother and stepbrother was satisfied. His desire for a more exalted position than that of his great-grandfather was also fulfilled. And at the same time, his eternal position in Dhruva Loka was fixed. Although Dhruva Maharaj's achievement of an eternal planet was not conceived of by him, Krishna thought, what will Dhruva do with an exalted position within this material world? Therefore he gave Dhruva the opportunity to rule this material world for 36,000 years with unchangeable senses, and the chance to perform many great sacrifices, and thus become the most reputed king within this material world. And after finishing with all this material enjoyment, Dhruva will be promoted to the spiritual world, which includes the Dhruva Loka. Hare Krishna, what a purport. You want to become like Dhruva Maharaj? No? Whoa. Okay. Text 30. Dhruva Maharaj thought to himself, to endeavor to be situated in the shade of the lotus feet of the Lord is not an ordinary task, because even the great brahmacharis, headed by Sanandana, who practiced Ashtanga Yoga in trance, attained the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet only after many, many births. Within 6 months, I achieved the same results. Yet due to my thinking differently from the Lord, I fell down from my position. Purport. In this verse, Dhruva Maharaj himself explains the cause of his moroseness. First, he laments that to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly is not easy. Even great saintly persons, like the 4 celebrated brahmacharis, headed by Sanandana, Sanaka, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumara, practiced the yoga system for many, many births and remained in trance before getting the opportunity to see the Supreme Lord face to face. As far as Dhruva Maharaj was concerned, he saw the Supreme Lord personally after only 6 months of practice in devotional service. He expected, therefore, that as soon as he met the Supreme Lord, the Lord would take him to his abode immediately without waiting. Dhruva Maharaj could understand very clearly that the Lord had offered him the rule of the world for 36,000 years, because in the beginning he was under the spell of the material energy and wanted to take revenge against his stepmother and rule over his father's kingdom. Dhruva Maharaj greatly lamented his propensity for ruling the material world and his revengeful attitude towards other living entities. Text 31. Alas, just look at me. I am so unfortunate. I approached the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can immediately cut the chain of repetition, the repetition of birth and death, but still, out of my foolishness, I prayed for things which are perishable. Purport. The word anatmyam is very significant in this verse. Is there a period after this in the book? Huh? No, after this.
Yes.
In this period, verse period?
That's a period. It's not a comma.
Okay, so we have to take out that period. Can you make a note? Thanks. And then tell me later. I'll send it to Dravida. Atma means the soul, and anatmya means without any conception of the soul. Srila Vrishabhadev instructed his sons that unless a human being comes to the point of understanding the Atma, or spiritual position, whatever he does is ignorance, and this brings only defeat in his life. Dhruva Maharaj regrets his unfortunate position, for although he approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he was always able to give his devotee the highest benediction of cessation of the repetition of birth and death, which is impossible for any demigod to offer. He foolishly wanted something perishable. When Hiranyakashipu asked immortality from Lord Brahma expressed his inability to offer such a benediction because he himself is not immortal. Therefore, immortality, or complete cessation of the chain of repeated birth and death, can be offered by the Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead himself, not by others. Harim bina na mritim taranti. It is said that without the blessings of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, no one can stop the continuous chain of birth and death within this material world. Therefore, the Supreme Lord is also called Bhavachit. The Vaishnava philosophy and the process of Krishna consciousness prohibits the devotee from all kinds of material aspirations. A Vaishnava devotee should always be anyabhilashita shunya, free from all material aspirations for the results of fruitive activities or empiric philosophical speculation. Dhruva Maharaj was actually initiated by Narada Muni, the greatest Vaishnava, in the chanting of Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This mantra is a Vishnu mantra, for by practicing the chanting of this mantra, one is elevated to the Vishnu Loka. Dhruva Maharaj regrets that although he was initiated in the Vishnu mantra by a Vaishnava, he still aspired for material benefits. That was another cause for lamentation. Although he got the result of the Vishnu mantra by the causeless mercy of the Lord, he lamented how foolish he was to have strived for material benefits while practicing devotional service. In other words, every one of us who is engaged in devotional service and Krishna consciousness should be completely free from all material aspirations. Otherwise, we will have to lament like Dhruva Maharaj. And we'll stop there. The reading for tonight. Hare Krishna. Dhruva Maharaj ki jai. So we're going to open up the field for reflections, and anything that stood out in the reading you may reflect upon or discuss further or question, whatever.
Thank you very much. Yeah, in the first purport, in the very beginning, we're hearing about pure devotional service. And it said, pure devotional service has no material form. But I was wondering, can it have like a material aspect? Because what I'm thinking is, let's say a pure devotee constructs a temple, and it's not a material place, but is there a material aspect? Because if I'm a gross materialist, I still see, like the temple itself. So.
First, I'll begin with the definition of pure devotional service. It begins anyabhilasita sunyam, jnana karmadi anavritam. So, anavritam means not covered by jnana or karma. And anyabhilasita, anyavilas would mean no other desire. But Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary on this verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, says that the suffix ita means under ordinary circumstances. In other words, under ordinary circumstances, a devotee doesn't pray to the Lord for anything material. But he says in an extreme case, such as when a devotee is being attacked by someone who wants to kill him, for example, he may pray to the Lord for protection. But that's not considered a violation of the definition of pure devotional service. Because under ordinary circumstances, he doesn't pray for anything material. But as far as the so-called material energy being... Oh, do you have a question about that or some? Yeah. So far as the so-called material things being engaged in the service of the Lord, we read earlier on that ultimately nothing is material, and if it's used in the service of the Lord, it takes on its spiritual quality. Just like the deity, everyone knows that the deity is made of marble or metal, which is material. But at the same time, it's more than just marble or metal. But according to the person's consciousness, he may see Krishna or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or he may see a stone statue or a metal object. And yeyatamam prapadyante, the Lord reciprocates accordingly. So Srila Prabhupada said, if you see the deity as Krishna, the deity can speak to you. And if you see the deity as stone, the deity will remain as stone forever for you. So it's a matter of the devotee's consciousness, or not just the devotee's consciousness, the person's consciousness. So, but I'm not sure I covered everything in your question. I'm not sure I understood your question in full. Is there anything remaining?
In your question, you mentioned, someone may, for instance, build a temple, and there may be some aspect of it which may seem to be material. Well, I think that Maharaj answered it, actually, because you may be in the temple, and you may be in material consciousness. But that's not pure devotional service. So the answer is that in pure devotional service, there isn't anything material in pure devotional service. As Maharaj hinted at, the Lord has the capacity, because everything ultimately is coming from His own transcendental body, and anything that comes from His transcendental body, which is spiritual, is ultimately spiritual. But He manipulates the energy such that some of that energy appears to be inert, even though it's actually a spiritual. So He has the capacity to transform any form, any part of the world, material world, and make it spiritual when it's engaged in pure devotional service. So in that sense, there actually isn't anything material in relationship to pure devotional service. Even if a person builds a huge temple and is attached to collecting so much money to do it. But in doing that, his conscience may be, this temple belongs to me. And if that's the case, then it's not pure devotional service. And he might as well be living, in a hotel or something.
So is it a contradiction?
It seems she's asking, Patricia is asking Dr. Janaki, is asking, isn't there an apparent contradiction there? Yeah, it is. It's apparent. It seems counterintuitive. But that's Krishna's position. Krishna can do anything. Jiva Goswami in his Sandarbhas says that unless one can actually understand and accept that Krishna's is conceivable, that his potency is inconceivable, that he can do anything, then you can't actually fully understand him. That's why so many people have their conceptions of God, and they have some faith from God, but because they don't have a fully spiritual conception of God, or a complete conception of God, therefore, their worship doesn't get the result, which is pure love of God. Because when there's pure love of God, if it's actually pure devotional service, then one cannot think of anything but Krishna. And everything that one looks at, one sees in relationship to Krishna.
In other words, is it just summarized with, so like saying God is...
In other words, is it summarized that God is omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient? Yes. Yes. Yeah, actually, those words are there in the Christian theology, but actually, what those words actually mean, the depth of the meanings of those words, is very seldom understood, and definitely not understood to the extent that they're explained in the Srimad-Bhagavatam.
Just on the point of material things. So in Queen Kunti's prayers, she prays, Akinchana Gochara, that the Lord is the property of those who are akinchana, who have no material possessions. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada discusses the two meanings of that word. One is, one actually has no possessions. There are some rare sadhus at Govardhan that basically have no possession. The other is that one has no sense of false proprietorship. And he gives the example of a temple, that if you think you're the proprietor of the temple, you can't get Krishna. But if you have no sense of false proprietorship, you can get Krishna. Kinchana Gochara.
Thank you very much.
I have another question. So why is...
Well, take this.
So it seems like Dhruva Maharaja is very conflicted. So as in, he's trying to find his inner peace. Kind of the situation with the stepmother, he holds a lot of grudges. So how did the story end? I guess I have to come to more readings. Did he ever find his inner peace?
Keep reading the books. Yes, he did. Immediately when he saw Krishna face to face, and that's described already in the verses we heard today, that he lamented, that he had those desires, and he immediately gave them up when he saw the Lord. So the reason why you're thinking it's conflicted is because the Lord fulfilled them anyway. That's the causeless, unlimited, inconceivable mercy of the Lord, that He'll fulfill desires that you don't even know you had, what to speak of desires that you had and then gave up. Yeah. In other words, the pure devotee is so dear to Krishna that love that the pure devotee has for Krishna controls Krishna. Just like sometimes a father will give something to the son that he knows may not be good for the son, or he may not do some mischief and break a window with a BB gun or something, whatever. Nowadays, who knows what they give sometimes. But he gives it anyway out of love because the child just insists. Prabhupada tells the story one time, his father gave him a gun, a toy gun. And then Prabhupada said, I want another one. He says, why do you want another one? Because I have two hands. So he says, oh, all right. And he gave the two guns, I guess.
Well, the reason I say that, because you see so many people in the position, and, they have a lot of material things, but you constantly see it. And, as a young doctor, I always say, you have to find that peace within.
See, you bring this up a lot. You're looking for the peace within. Yes. But the devotees were not looking for peace within.
Right,
but the people are looking for peace within by avoiding those things that don't give peace.
Right.
And they're thinking that that's peace.
Exactly.
But it isn't.
Right. No, I agree.
So when a pure devotee actually comes in contact with Krishna through his holy name and when he becomes absorbed, hearing about Krishna, serving Krishna's devotees, saving the deities, distributing prasadam, going out and meeting people and trying to give them Krishna in form of books and whatever, then he gets something that's way, way, way beyond peace.
Yeah.
So the point is that when one actually attains Krishna, then he gets everything, even the things that include peace, but much, much more. So therefore Dhruva Maharaj, even though he had all those things fulfilled, he was ashamed. So a devotee is so pure that even when he achieves Krishna, he's ashamed about the desires he had before he attained Krishna that he no longer has. It's a deep level of humility, a deep sense of agreement with Krishna that is real oneness. Then he becomes not just peaceful, he becomes situated in his natural constitutional position, and that's what gives us actual peace, when we're situated in our natural constitutional position.
Hare Krishna Maharajas. My question is kind of on the line of the question about using materials for your Krishna consciousness. I was thinking when you're going out on Harinam and it's really cold, I've read in spiritual culture that just someone seeing devotional clothing like dhoti and chadar, it's really like enlivens their spiritual Krishna consciousness. But also, like, if you're not wearing something in the cold, then you might be shivering and not playing your instruments as well or singing quite right.
Or you might get sick and you won't be able to do your devotional service.
So
I'll tell you a story. I don't know if it's such a brief. I'll tell this story, then you can. Yeah. Once in San Francisco, in the early days, there was a devotee who heard that prasadam was never contaminated, even if it falls on the ground. It doesn't become contaminated. So then he thought, well, sometimes the guests at the Sunday feast, they leave remnants. So he decided he would take those remnants. And so it got back to Prabhupada that he was doing that. And he corrected him. He said, actually, the prasad is not contaminated, even by the contact with a materialistic person. But if that materialistic person is carrying some kind of germ or some kind of disease, and then you get that disease, and then the next day or whatever, however long it takes for it to incubate, you get that disease, and you're not strong enough to continue your devotional service, then that would be a mistake. But if you are strong enough, then it doesn't make any difference. So these kinds of questions they're relative in a sense to the person, relative to the spiritual attainment of the person. Like Raghunath Das Goswami's renunciation. He was so renounced he practically didn't eat, and we saw what happened to Dhruva Maharaj. He just ended up, taking a gulp of air every two weeks or something like that, and it's way beyond our conception. On the other hand, Maharaj Yudhishthira prayed to Krishna when he was going to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice, which is the greatest sacrifice that you can perform in the material world. And he told Krishna, Krishna asked him what he wanted, and he said, I want to be known as the greatest person in the universe. And then Krishna looked at him and said, my devotee doesn't want to be seen as the greatest person in the universe. Why should you want such a thing? I don't understand. Of course, he understood, but so then he said, yes, I want to do this, and I want everybody to think that I'm the greatest position in the world, because then when they ask me, how did you do that? I would say, by surrendering to Krishna, because he's actually the greatest in the world. So and sometimes some devotee may accept, like Prabhupada. He was in Vrindavan for 9 years with practically nothing. I mean, really nothing. He had one set cloth, and he was keeping track of what he spent for his, eating vegetable, this, and practically nothing he had. But he was working so hard to prepare to come to the West and save the world. And then when Krishna saw that he was completely tested and he was the person, then gradually he gave him everything. And he had more properties and more places that he could go and live comfortably, and more people throwing flowers, on him wherever he went, than any other person in the whole world. Because nobody had ever come around the world and done that before. So my sergeant of arms has given me an indication that I just ran out of time. Hare Krishna. But that doesn't mean that this has to stop, because this is actually very nectarian. But I actually, already you hear my voice? It's already just a little bit too deep, and tomorrow morning I've got to read for the audiobook, and it's got to be completely consistent. So I have to stay regulated. So I'm going to turn the program over to His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj, which he's already in charge of it anyway. I'm just Hare Krishna. I'm just going to sneak.
Can't you be a silent observer and keep our consciousness up?
No, I have to get the sleep I need in order to keep that resonance. If I don't do that right now, it's not working. I'm going to have to
do what you have to do.
Because I get it at 2 o'clock. So if I don't, but I have to get at least 4.5 or 5 to do it. With the permission of the Vaishnavas. I'll just kind of sneak out and vicariously enjoy. Okay.
Hare Krishna. Panchakalpatrubhyascha kripa sindhuveva cha patitanam pavane Vaishnava.
How do we get Krishna's blessings?
Well, in one verse in the Adi Purana, Krishna says, those who claim to be my devotees directly are not my devotees, but those who are the devotees of my devotees, they're my real devotees. So by, yasya prasadat bhagavat prasada, by pleasing the devotee, one pleases Krishna. In Prahlad's discussion with his father, Hiranyakasipu, his father asked him, his father wanted him to become a great demon like himself. And when he asked Prahlad what was the best thing you learned in school, Prahlad replied, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam. And the father became furious. So he called for the boy's teachers, two Brahmins and said, this boy is speaking in favor of Vishnu, who's my enemy. You are teaching him wrongly. So they said, no, we didn't teach him that. Then the father said, well, then you're allowing Vaishnavas to enter the school in disguise and pollute the students. And they said, no, we haven't allowed any Vaishnavas to enter secretly. Then where did he get this? They said, well, we don't know. You better ask him. So Hiranyakasipu asked Prahlad, how did you become Krishna conscious? And Prahlad replied, Matir Krishna Parato Satova. Matir means like inclination, inclination to Krishna. No, not. Matir Krishna Parato Satova. Parato means by the efforts of others, and Swato means by one's own efforts. And then he says, or by the combined efforts of others and oneself, one cannot get Krishna consciousness. So that seems to eliminate all logical possibilities. But then Prahlad said that one can become Krishna conscious only by taking the dust of the lotus feet of a pure devotee who's completely free from material desires. So, in effect, he was telling his father that you don't need to worry about becoming Krishna conscious because you're too proud. You'll never bow down to the lotus feet of a pure devotee. But that's the answer. So, yeah, by serving the pure devotees, being the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant. Srila Prabhupada said we should address each other as Prabhu. Prabhu means master. So the idea we address each other as Prabhu, that means we're the servants of the Prabhus. So, yeah, by serving the devotees, pleasing the devotees, get the blessings of Krishna. And of course, serving means following the instructions. So that would include the instructions on devotional service, bhakti yoga, rising early, attending the programs, chanting, reading, serving. And sharing with others, distributing books, prasad, somehow sharing Krishna consciousness. That pleases Krishna very much. That pleases the parampara very much when we bring others to Krishna, share Krishna with others. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Maharaj. So, could one practice the dhyana yoga and help people by showing them how to focus on self, realize what God has done for that person, and meditate on the Supreme Personality? In your experience of life, how hard is that to teach somebody that, to get them to understand that? And what time range do you normally have to spend with that person?
Well, the dhyana yoga mentioned in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is not really practical for people now. But we can just ask people to chant. I mean, it's the same, Krishna in the heart and Krishna in the form of the holy name are the same. But chanting is easier and more enjoyable. And Krishna Prasad is also Krishna. So you can give them Krishna Prasad. And talks about Krishna are also the same as Krishna. Like in our prayers we read Srimad-Bhagavatam is Krishna. So if we give people Krishna in the form of the holy name, in the form of the books, in the form of prasad, that can be effective very quickly. But it also depends on the individual, how long it takes. Like Srila Prabhupada said, you can surrender in one moment, or you may not surrender for many lifetimes. That depends on the individual. I guess Jai Chaitanya
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. In 4924, I was thinking something along these same lines when in the purport it says Ante Naranya Srimitahi. The result of whatever we do in executing spiritual activities is successful if we can remember Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then towards the end of the purport, it brought in what you were just talking about, how our program for life will be successful, and at the end of our lives we'll certainly be able to remember Krishna, and that prasad distribution has replaced distribution of money, and that performing Sankirtan Yagya and constantly chanting Hare Krishna mantra are our ways of remembering Krishna. And it was a little difficult for me to understand how they got from Dhruva Maharaj to saying that, and how Sankirtan and prasad distribution helps us to remember Krishna at the end of life. Maybe you could help us understand better.
Well, remembering Krishna is something we should do all the time. In fact, in Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, the basic principles are always remember Krishna, never forget him, and all the other positive injunctions and negative prohibitions are servants of the one positive injunction, always remember Krishna, and the one negative prohibition, never forget Krishna. So all of our activities in Krishna consciousness are meant to help us remember Krishna. In fact, in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, where that verse appears, Srila Prabhupada comments that we have so many activities in the Krishna consciousness movement, like we go out, we distribute books, we enroll life members, but they're all meant, to help us remember Krishna. But he also says, although all of our activities are meant to help us remember Krishna, he also says that that of all the spiritual masters' instructions, the instruction to chant a minimum of 16 rounds daily is most essential. So even though all of our activities are meant to help us remember Krishna, to engage us in thinking of Krishna, but if we don't chant our required quota of rounds, we won't be able to remember Krishna. And it's happened that devotees have engaged in activities but not chanted. And then after a while, those same activities that they were doing for Krishna, they start to do for themselves because they lost their Krishna consciousness because they stopped chanting. So, yeah. Yes.
So Maharaj, explain what is the benefit of chanting Krishna? It's hard to believe that one would forget Krishna or forget the God that created him, the God that is allowing him to have life, and would have to need to chant to remember that. So what is the spiritual benedictions for the chanting? I know it's not just to remember Krishna, because obviously God's not very, it shouldn't be that hard to remember. So what is the spiritual benefiction of chanting?
Our ultimate goal is to love Krishna and go back home, back to Godhead, and serve him personally. And that can be achieved by chanting purely, without offense. In the first verse of Shikshastaka, the 8 prayers by Lord Chaitanya. So he describes the benefits of chanting Hare Krishna. Chaito Darpano Marjano cleanses all the dirty things from the heart. Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam, it increases the ocean of transcendental bliss. And ultimately, as you go through the Shikshastaka, it's clear that ultimately you develop love for Krishna, and that's our goal. As we heard in the purports, there are these 4 purusharthas, that means like 4 goals of life: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. But there's the Panchama Purushartha, the 5th, and that is Krishna Prema. Prema Pumartha Mahan, that's the ultimate goal. And that can be achieved by offensive chanting, pure chanting. And then you realize Krishna. Yes, Hannah?
You said that if we worship the lotus feet of Krishna's devotees, that we get Krishna's blessing. And in order to do that, we should chant and follow the principles and attend the morning programs. And I've noticed that whenever you do those things and do what Prabhupada says, naturally that's there in your heart. But starting from the beginning, just chanting, and sometimes just going to the morning programs is so difficult because Maya is so strong. Like, maybe you should sleep instead. Maybe you should go home and take some apples rather than stay at the temple and chant. It's so difficult sometimes to even just do those things. The simple things, the things that we should do. But for me personally, the desire is there and it's very strong. And I think that, people just make plans for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And if I'm trying to chant my japa and I'm making plans for sleeping or making plans for eating, then I'm acting on the body. It's one thing to know it logically, but to actually be able to overcome it is very difficult. So
What's hard to overcome?
Maya pulling you away from doing your sadhana? When you follow your sadhana, everything is very easy. But when you don't, it's very difficult. So, is that whenever you just pray like a madman? Because sometimes I feel like me even being able to get up and me being able to chant my japa is Krishna's mercy.
Well, definitely we should pray, because at every step we're dependent on Guru and Krishna and Vaishnava's mercy. So we should constantly be praying. Srila Prabhupada was always praying. He gave a class in London in which he told the devotees that the difference between you and me is that you can fall down, but I can never fall down. And after the class, Srila Prabhupada came before the deities and he was praying very intently. So one disciple asked him what he was praying. He said, I was praying that I may never fall down. The disciple said, well, you just said you can never fall down. He said, yes, because I'm always praying that I may never fall down, therefore I will never fall down. So we have to pray at every step, to take rest early, to get up early, to chant our rounds. But association is also very important. Srila Prabhupada said, 90% of Krishna consciousness is association. So if you associate with, devotees who chant and hear and follow the regulative principles, then it'll be easier for you. And if you don't associate with them, it's practically impossible. So that's important. But as far as you're chanting and your mind is wandering, it's not ideal, and when our mind does wander, we should bring it back. But it's not a very unusual occurrence that you're chanting and you're hungry and you're thinking of eating something. Or instead of, I'm not saying this to be facetious, but like if you're thinking like you need to go home and have an apple, you could just keep some apples with you and
Whip it out.
That's using your intelligence.
No distractions.
Ha! Tricked you down, mine.
Full boards.
It's funny.
yeah. The mind, Burijan Prabhu has written a book about japa called Japa. He's spoken a lot about japa. And one thing he says, which is really true, is that the mind will always tell us that there are more important things to do than chant japa. So when the mind tells you that, you just have to reject it, with the intelligence, control the mind with the intelligence. The mind is the agent of the false ego. False ego doesn't want to surrender to Krishna. False ego wants to take the place of Krishna. And so the mind, as the agent of the false ego, will always give us so many reasons why we shouldn't surrender to Krishna, or why we should do something else. But we just have to, ignore that and do what we know is best for us. And you have experienced it. You yourself said it, how well things go when you chant, and how problematic they are when you don't. So, yeah. and have like a support system. I mean, I mentioned generally, association, or maybe have somebody who will, help you in your determination.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I heard this amazing pastime of yours when you were a newer devotee in Boston, and just been there for a couple of weeks, and there was a devotee who got in some Mahaprasad of Srila Prabhupada, the stale dal, been sitting around for many days, and you mentioned that when you tasted it, you did taste it as stale, but then later on there was a lot of spiritual bliss you experienced. So we talked about the prasadam being stale, and sometimes we should. Prabhupada, Kesabhati Maharaj said that you have to be careful with how we deal with prasadam. So is that something that we can take it, even take a risk and taste the prasadam, especially when some devotees when senior devotees have tasted it, and we can keep it and then later taste it?
The example that His Holiness Keshava Bharati Das Goswami Maharaj gave was taking remnants of people who might be sick, and therefore you could become sick and your service could be affected. The instance you cited, just to make it clear to the other devotees, when I came to the Boston temple, Srila Prabhupada was there. I mean, my first association came when Srila Prabhupada was there. And then after he left, when the devotees were taking prasad, someone brought out some dal that was Srila Prabhupada's remnants that had, it was old and it had gone off. So they were distributing it to the other devotees. I was very new, and they said, it's gone off, but it is Srila Prabhupada's remnants, and so it has spiritual potency. So if you want, you can try it. It's up to you. So I said, all right, I'll try it. So I did, and the initial impact of the dal on my tongue was, very distasteful. It had really gone off. But then after that, there was like another dimension to it that was like totally blissful and spiritually powerful. Like practically nothing I had eaten until that point. I don't even know if since then, but definitely not until then had I ever had that experience from eating Prabhupada's, anyone's.
How hungry were you?
Huh?
How hungry were you at that time? Or it has no relationship to that?
I don't remember being particularly hungry. It wasn't about that being hungry. It was Prabhupada's, Prabhupada's Maha.
Maharaj, maybe if you wouldn't have tried it, you'd be wearing white instead of orange.
I might be wearing blue and gray. Yeah, that's true. I mean, these are the things that sustain us. There's a verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhakta Pada Duli. Duli means, it means dust. Bhakta Pada Duli, that means the dust of the feet of a devotee. Bhakta Pada Jal, the water that has washed the feet of a devotee. And bhakta uchista. That means like the remnants of food eaten by a devotee. These three substances are very powerful. Okay. Thank you all. We'll continue tomorrow. And Hare Krishna.